What was the biggest problem for this offense last season? What was the number one reason why the 49ers couldn't get the ball into the end zone in 2024? Well, I've got an honorable mention for you, plus a huge take from a former 49er. Hit subscribe if you're looking for daily 49ers content, but I want to get into something real quick that I came across just right before I recorded that I thought was, hey, this is an honorable mention for why the 49ers were so off this season. So I want to at least give this some credit. The article, Nicholas McGee, Niners Nation, writing, surprise, the 49ers were officially the NFL's most injured team in 2024. An honorable mention for why the 49ers offense was so awful last season is definitely the injuries. FTN Fantasy's Aaron Schatz published the adjusted games lost, AGL data from 2024. AGL is a metric that measures the aggregate impact of injuries on a given team in a given season. Unsurprisingly, after a year in which they were down several starters for long periods of the campaign, the 49ers finished 32nd, dead last in AGL with 141.2. To compare that to 2023, in 2023, the 49ers had the fourth best AGL in the league with 34.5. Injuries weren't the sole problem for the San Francisco in 2024, but over 100 additional AGL, writes McGee, goes a long way to explaining why the 49ers went from precipice of a Super Bowl title to finishing 6-11. Super interesting take. Let me know in the comments if you feel like injuries were the number one reason why the offense was not successful this last season. That's an interesting one. But let's get into what former 49er, former Legion of Boom Seattle Seahawk, Richard Sherman revealed on his podcast, how this Deebo trade can actually be a really good thing for this offense. And in there are three things that I have to break down with you. And hopefully, like yesterday, you guys will be candid in the comments like you guys always are and let me know where you stand on a lot of this stuff because I think it's super interesting. I'm genuinely fascinated by Richard Sherman's takes on this. So let's get into first, a couple quotes, and then let's break down three ideas that he's putting across. Plus, I got a third quote later on in the video as well. So stick around for all that. But let's start with, sometimes you have too many mouths to feed and you don't have enough footballs. There's only one football and you're trying to feed Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle, Brandon Aiyuk. You're trying to get it to Deebo. And now you've got this draft pick in Ricky Pearsall. And you're trying to make sure you keep everybody happy. And it's very difficult to do. Sherman continues. Probably could have made that same slide. And I think this kind of simplifies things. I think it gets Kittle more involved in the offense, and he obviously has been fantastic and one of the best tight ends in the game. And I think that's something down the stretch that Kyle Shanahan realized that, hey, we're not using George Kittle enough. We need to find a way to get him the ball. And you cannot get everybody the ball when you have so many mouths to feed. This is absolutely incredible. I'm so blown away by how interesting this quote is to me because there are like 5 different really interesting storylines in here. Does Kyle Shanahan ever feel like he needs to, get a certain player the ball more? Is that even in his philosophy? Does he allow that idea? Like, there's so many interesting things, but we're going to start with the first one. The first and most basic question that I think that we need to answer here is it better for the 49ers to have one less individual target in order to target the key players that are remaining more often? Is it better for the 49ers to drop Deebo so that they can get the ball more to the other guys? And I think if you take it player by player, it's pretty interesting. George Kittle. Should George Kittle get more targets? 100%. If there's any player on this team I want to see getting more targets, it's George Kittle. Yes, I know that could break down. I know that he could get injured as he has many times. I understand he's aging, but goodness gracious, what George Kittle was able to do on some games where he had like 4 or 5 targets, with mountains George Kittle can move with half as many targets as I think he should be getting. Why aren't we feeding the guy more? My word, his ability to catch a ball contested, his ability to turn a 5-yard, bubble screen into a 35-yard play. George Kittle is incredible. And yes, he is massively helpful in the run game. He's also wildly powerful in the passing game. So I would love to see George Kittle get more targets. So on that one, Richard Sherman, I agree with you. Should Christian McCaffrey get more targets? I'm going to say yes and no. I would love to see Christian McCaffrey become more of a wide receiver and less of a running back. So in that respect, I'm down with that. However, I also feel like we've been clamoring for Kyle Shanahan to limit Christian McCaffrey's touches for a long time. It would be really nice to see the 49ers take a different approach with CMC. So I'm kind of yes and no there, I suppose. Brandon Aiyuk, should he get more targets? I think the way that we targeted him in 2023 for Kyle Shanahan's offense was probably perfect. However, we just paid the guy big money. Big money. So should he still be a 49er at the start of the season? Should the 49ers get him more targets? I suppose you could argue that the amount of investment we've made into Brandon Aiyuk perhaps warrants him to catch the ball more. And to be fair, in 2023, Brandon Aiyuk was basically the most efficient wide receiver in the NFL. So do you want to take the most efficient guy in the NFL and reward him with, like, let's say 25 more targets over the course of a season and see what happens? Or you could have, I think the most targets or was it most receptions in 2023 was like 149 or something like that. So you could go up by like a good 50 basically. Would you do that? I don't know. In this type of offense, I'm not sure it makes a ton of sense, but I'm not going to go too deep on that point. Ricky Pearsall, should you get him more targets? Absolutely. I told you guys last season, my gut for a first-round draft pick, of course, the tragic situation that happens downtown San Francisco, there's nothing we can do about that. There's nothing he can do about that. If he could go back, he would love for that to not have happened, I'm sure. But that situation plays out. He doesn't get as many targets because he's not able to play as many games. He's just not eligible, okay? That being said, I told you at the beginning of the season, I felt like Ricky Pearsall, first-round draft pick, if he's not getting at least 50 targets this season, I'm going to feel a little disappointed. That was my honest, that was my take, okay? Now, going into next season, I would love to see Ricky Pearsall, with Deebo Samuel gone, I would love to see Ricky Pearsall getting over 50 targets. Bare minimum. That's where I'm at. Jacob Cowing, absolutely want to see him get more targets. I would love to see him in that Ronnie Bell range, that 30, 35 target range at the minimum. That would be great for Jacob Cowing because we got to work on that development. Again, this is still assuming Brandon Aiyuk's there. Okay, so Richard Sherman, your first take that I'm kind of, breaking down. Is it better for the 49ers to have one less target in order to get these other players? Is it better for these other players to get the ball more? I'll say yeah. I'm comfortable with that idea. Let's get these other guys more opportunities to get fed and to go make something happen on the field, okay? But there's a second take in there that is necessary for all this to work, which is Deebo being gone. So are we better without the Deebo threat? And I think this one is kind of hard to answer. There are a lot of layers to this. Are the 49ers better? I just broke something. I don't know what I just did. But who cares? I already asked the question, so we're ready for it. Are the 49ers better without the Deebo threat? Okay? On one hand, so don't at me yet because I'm gonna go to the other hand in a second. But on one hand, there were games where Deebo's usage was incredibly predictable, not creative whatsoever. Deebo in the backfield, everybody knows what's going to happen. He gets the ball, and he's already under intense pressure by the time the ball is in his hands. And if he doesn't make two guys miss, it's tackle for loss. That happens so many times. So many times. So in that respect, are the 49ers better last season had Deebo not been available for some of those games? Sure, I can buy into that reality. On the other hand, Deebo was also a wide receiver, and the 49ers desperately needed Deebo to be a solid wide receiver. And in that respect, I think the threat of Deebo, the yak attack threat of Deebo, even though middle of the season, other teams have kind of figured out maybe that's not going to be a problem. But beginning of the season, for sure, the yak threat of Deebo certainly has you second guessing. I have to imagine if I'm a safety, I'm second guessing when I see linebacker moving toward Deebo Samuel. I'm thinking about my positioning to be in a position to be the next guy there, right? Missile attack kind of thing. So, okay, so there's that threat too, okay? To go back though, he's also not an over-the-top threat. he's also not gaining incredible separation. So by the middle of the season, other teams seem to have figured out, we just man-to-man this guy, and we don't have to worry about it. He's not going anywhere. We got this covered. And as long as you're hitting him, making contact around the time he's catching the ball, we're going to be just fine. So I'm not 100% sold on this one. I'm like kind of half sold, half not. Let's get to another quote, though, because there's another quote that I think is super interesting here, and then we'll wrap this video up. Sherman kind of talking about Brock Purdy here, talking about how this is a benefit to Brock Purdy having Deebo gone. I think this is sometimes addition by subtraction, kind of simplifying. Hey, I don't have to get the ball to all these guys anymore. I can just run the offense more straightforward. Whoa. This is kind of crazy because I was listening to 95.7 The Game the other day, and I actually managed to catch a segment where they were talking about the 49ers and not the Warriors, which is tough this time of year. And it was either Willard or Shasky. I can't remember if it was Morning Roast or I can't remember. But it was either Mark Willard or Shasky that were talking about how there were moments last season where you could really see Kyle Shanahan is trying to get Deebo the ball. Trying to get him the ball, which is not really the way that Kyle Shanahan's offense has ever been designed. And I think that's a fascinating point of view. We're going to talk about Purdy in a second, but just on Kyle Shanahan for a second. Even if you say, nah, that's just coincidence. There was a moment in the season where Deebo Samuel goes home, he's frustrated after the game, and he's typing on his phone on Twitter, and he's telling everybody how disappointed he is because he didn't get the targets that he wanted. He didn't get enough opportunities, right? Which fan base was super angry about, myself included. Then, what happens the very next game? Deebo Samuel gets a bunch of targets, gets a bunch of touches. So, from a Kyle Shanahan perspective, what Richard Sherman's talking about is actually fair. I do think there's a connection between a coach and a player who've been together for so long and have this connection where there's like a feeling of responsibility. And to be fair, Deebo Samuel took the game by the horns against the Philadelphia Eagles not that long ago, and at halftime basically said, we're going to make this happen. And he went out there and he owned. So it's very much possible that Kyle Shanahan does feel some pressure in that moment. Maybe pressure is not even the right word, where he does feel like he owes it to Deebo to give him the shot. You're a captain. You're a leader. You say this is what we need. I want to be a good leader and let my leaders lead. And so there you go. Handing the torch off to you, Deebo. Here you go. This is your shot. I'm not sure it's that simple, but I do get the idea. Okay. Now, related to Brock Purdy, I'm totally different on this opinion when it relates to Brock Purdy. Is there an addition by subtraction situation for Brock Purdy because Deebo's not in the field? Okay. Now, in the Kyle Shanahan system, there should not be pressure on Brock Purdy. He's going to do his reads regardless of which players are where. He should be doing the reads based on the play schematic, based on the play design, and it should not matter if Deebo Samuel's on the field or not. He's going to go through his reads. A read is a read is a read. So if he is gaining a benefit from Deebo Samuel not being on the field, that would suggest that that Brock Purdy, one of the best processors in the game, okay, like coming from the mouth of guys like Tom Brady, okay, one of the elite processors, one of the fastest guys in terms of mindset on the field, in the play. We would have to believe the idea that Brock Purdy is doing his reads, and when he gets to Deebo, there's this extra little hesitation there because it's Deebo. And because he knows he needs to get Deebo the ball more, right? Like, I get that there's a reality in NFL, in college football. There is a reality that where quarterbacks do feel pressure to get the ball to certain guys. But I think in the ideal, that's not how things are supposed to be operating. That pressure, Deebo shouldn't be putting that, as a captain, should not be putting that pressure on his quarterback to get him the ball more, okay? And in the ideal, Brock Purdy in this system this is not Devontae Adams at the beginning of the season with the Raiders where it felt like, dude, if you're not targeting Devontae Adams, what are you doing? It's not that. It's a different situation. And I don't believe in the Kyle Shanahan system that Brock Purdy in the ideal is feeling pressure of getting spreading the ball out and getting all these guys the ball. I think he's going through his reads, and he should not be second guessing because it's Deebo. I feel more pressure. I got to get him the ball. So on this take, and please, somebody who played, college football quarterback or something like that, let me know if I'm wrong on this. That's just my take, and I would be more than happy to be convinced otherwise, because I think it would be obviously an advantage. What Richard Sherman's talking about here is an advantage. Overall, it's an advantage for the 49ers per Richard Sherman, and I agree with him in general that it is an advantage for the 49ers to have everything simplified, to have the 49ers looking, ironically, less predictable without Deebo Samuel, because it seemed somehow things had been figured out. And when Deebo Samuel had the ball in the backfield especially, other teams knew what was going to happen. When he was standing there in the backfield, before you didn't even have the ball, everyone just knew, okay, here's the ball's going to Deebo. Here you go. So unfortunately, I think there are some definite addition by subtraction scenarios that are playing out. Not all in on that idea, but I definitely see some benefits. Let me know what you think in the comments. As always, appreciate you. Have a fantastic evening.